Empty sleeve, empty honor. The thug's cruel laughter filled the diner. Then he deliberately slammed into Tom, sending the 65-year-old veteran crashing to the floor. An hour later, a black SUV screeched to a halt outside. Tom Banks sat quietly in his usual corner booth at the home front diner in rural Tennessee. At 65, the retired Army Staff Sergeant carried his empty left sleeve pinned neatly against his faded denim jacket, where a worn 5th Special Forces patch was still visible despite years of washing. The morning light filtered through dusty windows, painting golden streaks across the worn tabletop, where Tom methodically arranged the silverware with his remaining hand. 25 years had passed in Vietnam, but his military precision remained undiminished. Mike, the diner's owner, had hired Tom 3 years ago without hesitation. Just a firm handshake between two men who understood the value of routine after service. No questions about the missing arm, no pity in his eyes, just respect. Tom's movements were economical, practiced through decades of adaptation. The way he balanced trays, filled coffee cups, and handled bills with one hand had become so natural that regular customers hardly noticed anymore. Every morning at exactly 0700 hours, Tom arrived for his shift. His gray hair was always neatly trimmed, his posture ramrod straight despite his age. The phantom pain in his missing limb still troubled him, especially on cold mornings, but you'd never know it from his stoic expression. The diner represented something essential for Tom, structure in a world that had often felt chaotic since his return from war. Here, amid the clatter of plates and hum of conversation, he found purpose in simple service, a quiet dignity that had sustained him through darker days. The peaceful morning routine shattered when the bell above the door jangled harshly. 4 young men swaggered in, their voices unnecessarily loud, reeking of cigarettes and cheap beer despite the early hour. Tom's spine stiffened instinctively, decades of combat training alerting him to potential trouble. He recognized their ringleader, Denny Miller, a local troublemaker known for his exaggerated tales of military glory. In reality, Denny had never served a day, though he frequently boasted of covert operations that any actual veteran could instantly identify as fiction borrowed from action movies. "Well, look who's here," Denny announced, elbowing his companions as he spotted Tom. "It's Captain Hook still playing waiter." Tom kept his eyes down, methodically arranging menus for the lunch service. 30 years of military discipline had taught him when battles were worth fighting. This wasn't one of them. "Hey, I'm talking to you. Soldier boy," Denny continued, his voice deliberately carrying across the half-empty diner. "Didn't they teach you to acknowledge your superiors?" The scattered patrons shifted uncomfortably, but remained silent. Sarah, the young waitress behind the counter, shot Tom a concerned glance before suddenly becoming intensely interested in wiping spotless countertops. Tom approached their table with practiced calm. "Morning, gentlemen. Coffee." Denny sprawled across the booth, legs spread wide, taking more space than necessary. "Well, if it isn't the one-armed bandit, tell me something. How'd a cripple like you even get into the Army? Special handicap program?" His friend snickered on cue, while Tom's face remained impassive. He placed 4 menus on the table with precision. "Today's special is country fried steak," Tom said evenly, ignoring the jab. "I asked you a question, soldier," Denny pressed, voice rising. "Or did you lose your hearing along with that arm?" Tom's knuckles whitened slightly around the menus, but his voice remained steady. "I'll give you gentlemen a moment to decide." "Hey, I'm not done talking to you," Denny called as Tom turned away. "I served 3 tours with Delta Force. Show some respect to a real operator." Tom paused briefly, recognizing the blatant lie. Any actual Delta operator would never announce it in a public diner, but he continued toward the counter, without engaging. "Look at him," Denny's stage whispered to his companions. "One-armed wonder thinks he's too good to talk to us." Then louder, "Hey, hero, let me see how you balance these." He deliberately knocked his water glass off the table. It shattered across Tom's path, sending glass shards and water across the floor. Tom stopped, carefully navigating around the mess. "I'll get a mop," he said quietly. "You know what's pathetic?" Denny continued, standing now, playing to his audience. These old-timers walking around like they deserve special treatment. Vietnam was, 50 years ago? Get over it already. Tom returned with a mop, methodically cleaning the broken glass, his movements economical and precise despite having only one arm. "Look at this," Denny mocked, mimicking Tom's movements with one arm tucked into his jacket. The amazing one-armed janitor. "What happened, old man? Couldn't duck fast enough." "Sir," Tom finally responded, his voice level but with steel underneath, "I'd appreciate if you keep it down. We have other customers." Denny's face darkened. "Don't you sir me, Grandpa. I've seen more action than you ever did." He stood and deliberately stepped toward Tom, bumping him hard with his shoulder. Tom, balancing the mop with his one arm, lost his footing on the wet floor. He crashed down hard, his prosthetic hook detaching from his stump and skittering across the linoleum. From his jacket pocket, a weathered photograph and a small leather wallet fell out. The photo showed a much younger Tom in uniform, surrounded by a Special Forces team before the mission that took his arm. Denny laughed cruelly. Empty sleeve, empty honor. The diner fell silent, punctuated only by Denny's friend snickering. Tom lay there momentarily. The wind knocked from his lungs, his dignity stripped bare under the harsh fluorescent lights. Not a single person moved to help. The restaurant manager, Dave, watched from behind the counter, clearly calculating whether intervening might cost him paying customers. "Someone should do something," a woman whispered to her companion. "Not our business," came the muttered reply, with slow, deliberate movements born from years of adapting to life with one arm. Tom pushed himself upright. His face remained a disciplined mask, betraying nothing. Every Special Forces soldier learns that showing weakness can be fatal, a lesson that served him well now. He retrieved his prosthetic hook with quiet dignity, reattaching it to his left arm with practiced movements. Then he gathered his scattered belongings methodically, each motion precise despite the coffee soaking his uniform-like work shirt. At a corner table, an older gentleman in a Vietnam veteran's cap watched intently. His eyes narrowed as he noticed the Special Forces patch on Tom's jacket and the quiet dignity with which the older veteran handled the humiliation. Tom finally stood, straightened his jacket, and without a word, continued to the kitchen as if nothing had happened. "That's right. Hop along now," Denny called after him. "Back in my unit, we wouldn't have even let you serve coffee." The man with the Vietnam veteran's cap stood abruptly, fists clenched. Then, seeming to reconsider, he pulled out his phone instead and stepped outside, speaking urgently into it. "Hey, it's Sergeant Peterson. I'm at the home front diner. You're not going to believe what I just witnessed. Remember Tom Banks? The guy who pulled half our team out under fire in 71? Yeah, that Tom Banks. He needs us. Now." Inside, Tom continued working, his movements slightly stiffer than before, his 1,000-yard stare fixed on nothing as he methodically wiped down the counter. Exactly 1 hour after Tom hit the floor, the rumble of powerful engines cut to the diner's uncomfortable atmosphere. 3 black SUVs pulled up directly in front of the entrance, wheels crunching aggressively on gravel. The diner door swung open with military precision. 3 men entered in perfect formation, all in their 60s but carrying themselves with unmistakable authority. They wore civilian clothes, but their military bearing was unmistakable. The first, a tall man with a silver crew cut in shoulders like an oak beam, walked with a confident stride of someone accustomed to command. Behind him, a broad-chested man with a neatly trimmed beard scanned the diner with calculating eyes that missed nothing. The third, shorter but powerfully built, carried a specialized prosthetic arm far more advanced than Tom's simple hook. They didn't speak as they moved directly to where Denny and his friend sat laughing. The atmosphere in the diner shifted instantly, conversations dying mid-sentence as an almost palpable pressure filled the room. The silver-haired man stopped directly in front of Denny's table. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice deceptively soft but carrying a steel edge that commanded attention, "I understand you've been discussing military service." Denny's smirk faltered slightly. "What's it to you, old-timer?" The man smiled without warmth. "Colonel James Harrington, 5th Special Forces Group retired." He gestured to his companions. Major Davis and Captain Reynolds. The man with the prosthetic arm, Captain Reynolds, fixed his gaze on Denny. We understand you've been sharing your Delta Force experiences. Denny's face paled slightly. Look, we were just having some fun. Fun, Colonel Harrington repeated flatly. He turned toward the kitchen just as Tom emerged. Staff Sergeant Banks. Tom froze, then straightened automatically, his body responding to the command voice before his mind fully registered what was happening. Colonel, he responded, recognition dawning in his eyes. Colonel Harrington stepped forward and executed a perfect salute. Staff Sergeant Thomas Banks. It's been too long, sir. The respectful sir, addressed to a lower-ranking NCO, spoke volumes. Captain Reynolds stepped forward, his prosthetic arm gleaming. You probably don't remember me, Sergeant. Cambodia border, 71. I was the rookie you pulled out of that ambush after the mortar hit. You lost that arm saving his life, Major Davis added, loud enough for everyone to hear. And mine, and 4 others. Tom's stoic expression softened slightly. Just did what needed doing, sir. Colonel Harrington turned back to Denny, whose cocky demeanor had completely evaporated. Staff Sergeant Banks was point man on a classified extraction mission. When their position was compromised, he personally covered his team's retreat. Held off 20 enemy combatants with just his rifle and sidearm, Captain Reynolds continued. Took a mortar blast that should have killed him. Still managed to drag me 200 yards to the extraction point before passing out from blood loss. Throughout the diner, something remarkable began happening. The man in the Vietnam veteran's cap stood at attention. A middle-aged woman with an Army nurse pin on her jacket rose from her seat in the back. 3 National Guard members in civilian clothes stood in silent solidarity. I lost this arm, Tom finally said, his voice quiet but strong. But these men kept their lives. Fair trade, I'd say. Denny stared at his coffee. Earlier bravado evaporated. Colonel Harrington's voice rang with authority. The Army taught us many things. Honor, courage, never leaving a man behind. His gaze swept the diner, lingering on Dave, a manager who had chosen not to intervene. And that true strength isn't measured by how you treat those who can fight back, but by how you treat those who cannot. Dave approached their table, earlier indifference replaced with nervous deference. Your meals are on the house today, gentlemen. Soldiers pay their debts, Colonel Harrington replied evenly. We've always paid our way. As Denny and his friends quietly paid their bill and slunk toward the door, Major Davis called after them, Son, next time you want to pretend you served, remember this. Those who truly did rarely talk about it. Those who didn't ever stop talking. 1 week later, the home front diner looked different. Nothing dramatic had changed in the decor, but a subtle transformation had occurred in the atmosphere. The wall near Tom's regular station now displayed framed photographs of local veterans, their service branches and years proudly noted beneath each image. Tom's corner booth now bore a small brass plaque, reserved for those who served. Most days, it was occupied by veterans of various ages, from World War II survivors to recent Afghanistan veterans, sharing coffee and the unspoken understanding that comes only from shared sacrifice. Dave, the manager who had once prioritized paying troublemakers over basic decency, now greeted each veteran personally. His casual attire had been replaced with press shirts and a small American flag pin on his lapel. The changes weren't just cosmetic. He'd hired 2 more veterans as staff members and established a monthly dinner where local service members ate for free. Sarah, the young waitress who had remained silent during Tom's humiliation, had asked him to teach her about military rank structure and protocol. She now recognized different service insignias and understood which questions were appropriate to ask returning soldiers and which subjects to respectfully avoid. Colonel Harrington and his former team members now appeared regularly every Thursday evening, precisely at 1800 hours, for their weekly meal with Tom. They never discussed the incident with Denny and his gang. They didn't need to. Instead, they shared coffee and memories, occasionally falling into the comfortable silence of men who had faced death together. The diner itself had subtly transformed. What was once just another roadside eatery had become neutral ground where the civilian-military divide narrowed over cups of coffee and shared meals. Veterans who had previously kept to themselves now found camaraderie in a corner booth. Denny Miller never returned to the diner. Rumors circulated that he'd been confronted about his stolen valor by actual veterans at his workplace, resulting in a very public revelation of his lies. Tom never asked about him. He had more important things to focus on. For Tom, the most significant change wasn't in the diner's new veteran-friendly atmosphere, but in himself. The rigid mask he'd worn for decades had softened slightly. When asked about his service now, he occasionally shared carefully selected stories with young people curious about what service really meant. On a quiet Tuesday evening, a young man in a crisp new Army uniform entered the diner. He stood hesitantly just inside the door, clutching his cap, clearly a stranger to the town. Tom approached him. "First deployment?" he asked quietly. The young soldier nodded, visible relief washing over his face at being acknowledged. "Ship out tomorrow morning, sir." Tom gestured to the empty chair at their table. "Join us. Coffee's decent and the company's better. I wouldn't want to intrude." "You're not intruding, soldier," Tom interrupted gently. "You're continuing a tradition." As the young recruit settled at their table, Colonel Harrington raised his coffee cup in a silent toast. Around the diner, other veterans raised their cups in response. No words were exchanged, but none were needed. Tom had been invited to speak at the local high school about his service. After years of silence, he found himself sharing stories with teenagers. Not combat or injury, but of discipline, purpose, and the unbreakable bonds formed under pressure. "The uniform isn't what makes you a soldier," he told them. "It's standing tall when it would be easier to crumble. It's carrying weight for someone who can't bear it alone." The brass plaque on Tom's table caught the evening light, its simple message reflecting a profound truth. In this place, at least, no one who served would be forgotten. No one would stand alone. The greatest battles, Tom had learned, weren't always fought on foreign soil. Sometimes they happened in small-town diners, where the weapons were words, and the victory came not from defeating enemies, but from standing firm in who you are, even with one arm. Those who maintain their dignity when humiliated are the ones worthy of our deepest respect. If you believe that honor always finds its way back, please comment respect below to show you stand for dignity and courage.